We got a little bit of a different angle today. I used to do intros from my dining room table. That's been a while. That was like 3 years ago for anybody who has been around that long and saw my very first Dollar Tree dinners episode, which was the pizza video. So if you want to go to my channel and look at my oldest video, that was when I lived in Chesapeake, Virginia. And it was my first ever time cooking with and trying Dollar Tree food. If you've been following along for the past couple of weeks, then you will know that this is going to be my final episode of my minimal spend series. The purpose of that minimal spend series was to use up some things that I already had, mostly in preparation for a series that I call Budget Grocery Week. And also just to reset my fridge and my brain a little bit, because sometimes that's something I need to do. Back in January, I was posting a series of very similar meals where I was showing everything I bought and everything I cooked for the entire month of January. And I felt like, personally speaking, that was some of my best content that I have ever put out because it was very personal to me. It held me accountable for what I bought. I was sharing it all with you guys. I was showing what I bought from the grocery store and the meals that I put together from that. And I felt like it was very universally practical. And if I'm being honest, sometimes the best meals that I put together come from when I'm just rummaging through the fridge and making something with whatever I have on hand. At the beginning of this series, I did a full fridge inventory. I showed you guys kind of how I put together a meal plan based on what I already have. And we've cooked through pretty much everything in my fridge at this point. Last week I did an entirely zero spend meal prep session and I used up a lot of things during that video. And we have been eating those meal preps over the past week. To avoid burnout from eating a lot of the same things all the time, we would mix it up by adding in different sauces and toppings. You know, I'd throw in some things from the fridge. We would turn those burrito bowls into burritos and things like that. So I would try to take those meal preps and change them slightly in order to make them more varied and more interesting. But they did last us quite a bit longer than I thought they would, which is why this video is a few days delayed. And we weren't just eating those meal preps, because yeah, you would get burnout on those pretty quickly if that was all you were eating. But because meal preps are usually good for about a week in the fridge, and I only prepped I'd say about 4 days worth of meals for 2 people, I would throw in some other kind of mix-ins to break up the monotony a little bit. So some mornings we would have breakfast sandwiches. Some mornings we would have fruit with yogurt. Some days for lunches we would have sandwiches. Same thing for dinners. You know, I'd throw in some chicken sandwiches or some pizzas or things like that. So we would kind of break up the monotony a little bit, and that's how I was able to make those meal preps last me pretty much a week. Now, this past week, I technically could have gone the entire week without spending anything, but I did choose to pick up a couple of things this week. I grabbed some lettuce and tomatoes. Those were mostly for sandwiches, burgers, chicken sandwiches, regular sandwiches. I feel like lettuce and tomato are probably the 2 things that I like to keep on hand in order to make our meals feel more fresh. I also grabbed a pack of American cheese because one universal truth in this house is that Michael, as many of you guys know, will eat almost anything as long as I throw a slice of American cheese on it. In this house, I think we could almost consider American cheese to be its own like food group. And I did also pick up some tortillas. You know, again, we took some of those burrito bowls, we turned them into burritos. We took some of the breakfast bowls that I made, turned those into breakfast burritos. I could have made tortillas in order to save myself a couple of bucks, but I had a lot of meetings and deadlines and other things I've been working on over the past week. So I decided just to buy tortillas. And that's real life. You know, we're not always in a place where we can make everything from scratch all of the time. And the purpose of this was just to show you guys kind of a typical week of meals. Well, 2 weeks. It's been over 2 weeks since I started this series. Some days were more structured and other days we're just kind of throwing some stuff together and seeing what we can make of it. And I think for a lot of us, that's what kind of real life cooking looks like, you know, especially when you get into a groove and you're trying to use up the things that you already have without going to the grocery store. And I've mentioned this before, but I personally really think that I started to learn how to cook when I stopped relying on following a recipe verbatim, and instead reading a recipe and kind of using it as a guide and thinking to myself, if I didn't have a specific ingredient, what do I already have that might serve this specific purpose? Like, what purpose does this ingredient serve? What do I have that would replace that potentially? And then, I'd go on Google and just make sure that my thoughts aligned with reality. Or sometimes I would try to, cherry pick my data and find something that aligned with what I thought would work. And almost always it worked exactly like I thought it would. And I think that the past couple of weeks kind of shows you guys that, while my content is very food and recipe related and specifically trying a lot of new things, we eat a lot of the same things on repeat day after day, week after week. And that's just how it goes. Once you find something and you enjoy it, you kind of eat it until you're sick of it, and then you forget about it for a couple of months and then just repeat that process over and over again. So it's not always about coming up with new ideas and coming up with new recipes. Sometimes it's about just making the most of what you have and stretching things as far as you possibly can. And I think over the past couple of weeks, we have really achieved that. So this is the final episode of my Minimal Spend series. So I'm going to take you through some things that I cooked this week. At the end, I will show you an updated what's in my fridge tour. And then, And at the end, I will tell you exactly how much money I spent over the past 2 weeks on groceries. I do have to say, I really love this series and I am going to miss it. Over the past week, we've taken the fridge from looking like this to finally looking like this. And here's what we've been eating along the way. Of course, we've been working through the meal preps from last week. We made pasta salad, burrito bowls, jambalaya, and that hash mixture of potatoes, onions, and bacon. Some of that leftover hash got turned into breakfast burritos with a little cheese, salsa, and jalapenos added in. Some mornings were sausage, egg, and cheese on English muffins, quick, easy, and always a hit, or just keeping it light with fruit and yogurt. Lunches were often more of the meal preps. Sometimes we had grilled cheese with some of the tomato soup that I had frozen. I did add milk to this batch to see if it made a difference, and it definitely turned out creamier. We liked it better that way, though it did try to separate a little bit on me. It was still totally edible, just not the prettiest. One of our favorite lunch sandwiches came back this week too, what Michael likes to call the fancy sandwich. I made it and I brought it to him. He goes, "Oh, is this the fancy sandwich?" It's just kind of what we call it. But it's my version of the viral Italian grinder sandwich from a couple of years ago, except I just make it using whatever I've got on hand. It's evolved over time, but honestly, we really like it. And we had that 3 days this week. It never really gets old. As for dinners, we kept it pretty simple. Beyond the meal preps, we had chicken sandwiches, smash burgers, and pizza. I used the par-baked crust I had in the freezer, topped it with ham, pineapple, and jalapeno, and finally I made some banana bread with a few bananas that were on their last leg. The banana bread's probably a good place to start because honestly, what else do you do when you've got 3 spotty bananas staring you down every time you walk in your kitchen? So I grabbed those, I mashed them up with about a cup of sugar, and the sugar not only sweetens it, but it helps to break down the bananas into this soft, smooth base. Then I added 1 egg and a 1/4 cup of melted butter, stirred that all together until it looked like a smoothie. Next came the dry ingredients, 1½ cups of all-purpose flour, a tablespoon of baking powder, a teaspoon of salt, and a good teaspoon of cinnamon. I didn't even sift it, I just dumped it all in and mixed it until combined. I poured the batter into a greased loaf pan and popped it into a 325-degree oven, and the power went out about halfway through baking. I had about 15 minutes left on it when the power went out, so I just left the oven door closed, and I took it out whenever the power came back on, and luckily it was golden brown, perfectly risen. I let it cool down, sliced it for a couple of taste test pieces because obviously quality control is important, and then I wrapped and froze the rest to save for the kids. They absolutely love banana bread, and I like having a few treats tucked away for when they're here. Next up is the fancy sandwich, and it's one of our go-to summer meals. Super easy, very flavorful, and totally customizable. It's loosely inspired by the Italian grinder sandwich, which usually has deli meats, provolone, and a slaw made of mayo and red wine vinegar. When I first wanted to make this though, I didn't have any red wine vinegar, so I used the liquid from pickled banana peppers instead, and I like it that way. I mix that with mayo, Dijon mustard, season it with salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, and red pepper flake. And that mixture becomes the dressing for some thinly shredded iceberg lettuce, and that slaw is what really makes the sandwich. We build it up on lightly toasted bread, this week with ham, cheese, tomatoes, pickles, and that nice juicy slaw. It's crunchy, tangy, it's a little spicy, and it's one of those meals we don't really get tired of. Alright, third up we've got smash burgers, one of our favorite low effort, high reward meals. A while back, I had made a batch of burger patties and I froze them between sheets of parchment paper so I could just grab what I needed without dealing with a big block of frozen meat. This was my first time testing that out, and to me it worked beautifully. While I was digging around in the freezer though, I also found a bag of potato wedges I had completely forgotten about in the garage. I was out of waffle fries, so this kind of felt like a win from past me. I also keep hamburger buns in the freezer. They freeze very well, and it means I never have to worry about them molding before we can use them. Honestly, the freezer is my lifeline. Since it's mostly just the two of us, freezing things in smaller portions helps me cut down on waste and only cook what we actually need. I pan-seared the frozen patties and seasoned them with a little all-purpose seasoning. Because they were frozen, they didn't get quite as crispy on the edges as a fresh smash burger, but once everything came together, it was hardly noticeable. And of course, cheese. American cheese was pretty much all I had left at this point besides mozzarella, so it was going on everything. But honestly, it's a burger. American cheese just belongs there. I toasted the buns and layered on lettuce, tomato, pickle, and a generous drizzle of that homemade Big Mac sauce I had in the fridge from earlier in the week. On the side, we had those golden potato wedges fried in hot oil for about 5 minutes until they were crispy and perfect. And we dipped them in a little ketchup and mayonnaise mixture that I like to call special sauce because of the movie Step Brothers. And it all came together in about 20 minutes, and it was so satisfying. And lastly, we've got the pizza, and this one came together with a little creativity and a very unconventional pizza sauce. I was out of pizza sauce, but I still had one last container of homemade tomato soup in the freezer, and I figured if I reduce it down, it should work. And honestly, it totally did. After simmering it for a bit, it turned into this rich, dark, velvety sauce that ended up being perfect for pizza. I used one of my par-baked pizza crusts. I have a video on those if you want to make them yourself. Topped it with some of our tomato soup sauce, a good layer of mozzarella, some sliced deli ham, canned pineapple, and jalapenos. I love the combo of sweet and spicy, and I think pineapple and jalapeno just belong together. I baked it at 400 degrees for 12 minutes, and I thought I was in the clear until I pulled it out and realized there was a puddle of pineapple juice in the middle. I definitely should have drained the pineapple better, but no worries. I just blotted it with a clean kitchen towel, popped it under the broiler, and it crisped right up like nothing ever happened. Crisis averted. And let's talk about the way I've been cutting pizza lately into 3 big slices and 2 breadsticks. I saw it on TikTok and I've been doing it ever since. It's kind of unique, but it works perfectly for just the two of us. You get a few hearty slices, and those little ends are perfect for dipping or snacking. It's not the most traditional method, but neither was using soup as sauce, but it all worked out in the end. Are you guys ready to see the final fridge after the 2-week minimal spend series? Ta-da! It still has some stuff in it. It's not completely empty. But compared to where we started, this is where we're at. So we still have coffee creamer, milk, and almond milk. That milk is on its way out, but it's still good. So I'll put cereal on the menu for the kids this weekend, and then if we don't put a dent in that milk, I'll probably end up making cheese out of it. Because I buy whole milk specifically so that I can make fresh cheese if I don't end up using it all up before it goes bad or is about to go bad. So that's what this is. This is some homemade cream cheese. But it's pretty empty, as you can see. The doors are mostly just condiment. We've got some soy sauce in the back there. Sour cream, I have, I don't know, about a quarter of that tub left. Probably finish that off sooner than later. I did try to save eggs all week, so I have 6 eggs left. Last night is when I made the Hawaiian pizza with jalapenos, so I do still have some pizza sauce and some pineapple. I have enough that I could potentially make a second pizza today if I wanted to. Still have a little bit of that ranch dip and some homemade creamy sriracha sauce. And then this is my rendered beef tallow that I'm still working my way through slowly but surely. Mostly use it for like frying eggs and stuff, so I don't go through it like super quickly. But it lasts a really long time. When it's properly cleaned, it will last for like at least a year. Down to 1 yogurt, and I still have some of Michael's salmon cream cheese. Need to pick him up some bagels so he can eat through some of that. I have some of my lettuce for burgers or sandwiches, so this is the leaf lettuce. And then I have a little bit of deli ham, and I still have 2 rolls of smoked sausage. I didn't really touch these, and they're good until August, so I'll probably just let them hang out in my fridge. As far as cheese goes, I still have a few slices of American cheese and a teensy tiny bit of mozzarella cheese. Hopefully enough to make 1 more pizza, but I'm not sure. That might not quite be enough. And now for the produce drawer. So I do kind of regret buying those baby carrots. We haven't even eaten any of them. This is completely unopened. So I'm just gonna let those hang out too. They're really hardy. They last a long time. And I do kind of wish I had bought a smaller thing of tomatoes. So I need to intentionally start to eat some of these because some of them are starting to get a little shriveled up. So I do wish I had just gotten one of like the pint-sized ones. This was the cheapest cost per ounce, and that's why I bought that. But that's kind of breaking my own rule, because just because something is cheaper per ounce doesn't necessarily mean that it's a better deal. Because sometimes buying in bulk makes you have to like use it up. So it actually ends up costing you more if you end up wasting some of it. I do have a few slices of tomatoes, and I have a handful of shredded lettuce left in here. I had picked up about a pound of tomatoes, so I have 2 of them still to use, and a handful of apples. So we'll probably snack on some of those this weekend as well. I'll put them on the menu for the kids so that they know we have them. Same thing with the tomatoes and the carrots. I'll put them on the menu for the kids so that they know we have them. So I still have plenty of things that I could work with in my freezer and in my pantry, but those have a longer shelf life. So that was not my priority over the past couple of weeks. I just really wanted to clear out this fridge and start fresh as far as the fridge goes before diving into something new. So again, this week I bought lettuce, tomatoes, burrito-sized tortillas, and American cheese. And I spent $9.77 on those ingredients. If you add that to the grocery haul I did at the beginning of the series, which I believe was $60.81, that puts my grand total over the last 2 weeks at $70.58, so around $35 a week on average. I did spend the bulk of that up front, then we ate through to the point of like almost nothing, and then I did 1 very small kind of supplemental run just to pick up a few things that I thought would make our meals more interesting. And so overall, I am extremely happy with how this went. Could I have done it for less? Probably, absolutely. But that's why I called it a minimal spend and not a no spend. I wanted to mostly be able to repurchase produce whenever I ran out of those things, or cheese, because cheese is its own food group here. I think we did a really great job on this series. I hope you guys agree with me. We made the most of every little thing. That fridge is pretty much empty. We do have the kids coming this weekend, so I will probably pick up a couple of things just to get us through the weekend. But otherwise, I am extremely happy with how this series went and the meals that we made from it. And I hope you guys got some great inspiration as well. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you again soon. And again, we are going to be starting a new budget grocery week, which I'm really excited about.